There's been a big debate around strategy, Krystal. How can the Democrats pull it out against Trump? One strategy is just to ignore the polling. The other is to look for silent indicators that may seem like things are better than they seem. But on MSNBC, what is his name? Donnie Dowish. We're not exactly sure where he came from or how he became a political analyst. But he's on Morning Joe, and nonetheless, he's on the president's favorite television show. And he's come up with a new strategy about how to make sure that Biden does beat Trump in the upcoming general election. Let's take a listen to his analysis.
I'm afraid. You know, I've been one of the most outspoken guys. You know, it's interesting. Somebody said to me, are you afraid if he gets reelected? And I hadn't thought about it. And like, he's going to come after Joe. He's going to come after me. He might come after you. I mean, this is what people are not comprehending. And here's the campaign the Democrats need to run. And I've been thinking about this a lot. There are 4 people that need to step forward: Kelly, Mattis, McMaster, and Milley. And there needs to be a general campaign where these generals who have worked with him need to turn to the American public and turn to camera and say, you don't understand how scary this can be. We really can go over a cliff here. These people, patriots, need to start to stand up, because that's what America listens to. I think if you do the right campaign with those 4 guys and you continue to put the message out, you're going to lose control of your bodies. Women, immigration, it will even get worse, as it did the first time with Donald Trump. Our democracy is really, really, really online here, and our way of life will change. Get people, scare the shit out of people.
Scare the shit out of people.
Inspiring.
That's his strategy. Very inspiring, Krystal. And also, it's definitely like it's never been done before. It's not like we've heard all that rhetoric all this time around. So there's a lot going on here, but it fits with a general panic inside the Biden administration. And the Biden admin did a long profile with Evan Osnos. He's a reporter over at The New Yorker. And they gave us a little preview into their electoral strategy. So let's go and start with their first one. Here's Joe Biden's last campaign, trailing Trump in the polls and facing doubts about his age. The president voices defiant confidence in his prospects for re-election. The most noteworthy quote, I thought, came from Tom Donilon. Donilon is a longtime Biden advisor. He's a real whisperer. And here's the strategy. He says, quote, by November, he predicted, the focus will become overwhelming on democracy. I think the biggest images in people's minds are going to be of January 6th. So he sees a parallel, Krystal, to the race between George W. Bush and John Kerry. At the time, Donilon says he worked for Kerry. The Democratic Party didn't want to believe it was a 9/11 election. Instead, the party wanted to focus on an array of issues like other things, but it all came back to 9/11. Now, I'm just going to say I think 9/11 was a little bit more pertinent and different in 2004 because we were in the middle of a massive war in Iraq, but maybe that's just me. Now, let's lay out how Donilon arrived at this conclusion. Many of us, including at this desk, were poo-pooing that strategy ahead of the 2022 midterms. It ended up being tremendously impactful. That said, that was also a combination of abortion. We will never actually know what the real impact of Stop the Steal and abortion was. I still believe that abortion was far more influential than a lot of Stop the Steal, and I would have loved to be able to see an election without abortion on the ballot that was purely about kind of MAGA kookery. Now, I'm not going to say it didn't have any impact, but I think it was relatively marginal as opposed to abortion. That said, are you really going to bank it all on, frankly, what's barely saved you last time from 2022, and 2 more years removed from the date? Why do you possibly think it is as relevant as 9/11 was in 2004, when, as I said, we were still litigating at a very, like real degree where our troops were dying in the middle of a war and we were still in the, all this morass in Afghanistan? How can you possibly think that those two are still so linked in like the American consciousness when people are going to go to the polls? It's March 5th right now. It feels, a million miles away, January 6th. Now, add several months to that for Election Day. I think it's an incredibly foolhardy strategy.
It just seems like there is an unbelievable amount of complacency and arrogance among the Biden people, and that they've drawn these lessons from both his ability to win the primary, the Democratic primary back in 2020, with a lot of assistance from Obama and the media and whatever, but he was able to pull that off against the odds and people had counted him out, et cetera, et cetera. And you combine that with the overperformance in the midterms. I mean, they still didn't win the House, but they did much better than the predictions. They did much better than incumbent presidents usually do in midterm elections. And they've just decided that data doesn't matter, criticism doesn't matter, that they can just stay the course and block everything out and it's going to be just fine. And so, I mean, that's what you see from here. Now, listen, we haven't seen any affirmative. We're on the State of the Union this week. Maybe Biden will lay out some more affirmative, positive-looking vision of what the second term would look like. That's possible. We'll see, but he ain't done it yet. And it's very clear that they're leaning into basically the Donnie Deutsch strategy of let's just scare the shit out of people and hope it works one more time. Maybe it will. I don't know. I mean, Republicans don't do themselves any favors with all of the like wacky shit that they're doing all the time, not just January 6th. And I think from my assessment of the midterms, you can't really pull apart the factors of stop the steal and that sort of kookery and January 6th and abortion and the level of extremism with regard to that issue. It just made the entire party seem like they were fringe wackos. So I think it all sort of plays in together. Maybe that works again, but I don't know how you look at these polls, not just a one-off, not just an outlier, not just an occasional poll, but literally every poll that comes out and not say, you know what, we may be thinking about this wrong. We need to reassess. We need to come up with some ideas of how to actually defeat Trump. And we're going to talk more about the SCOTUS ruling here in a bit, but I also think they need a wake-up call that the legal system is not going to save them. It's not going to come to their rescue. It's not clear that it's going to change significant votes from Trump to Biden. They are going to have to figure this out themselves. And right now, there's just nothing but arrogance and complacency coming from everybody around him.
You also see almost frankly delusional promises coming from Biden.
True.
Let's put this up there on the screen. This was what really struck me whenever they asked Biden what exactly he was going to do in his second term. He says, quote, "I will pass Roe versus Wade as the law of the land. Democrats would then need to win control of the House of Representatives and gain seats in the Senate." But he expressed confidence. A few more elections like we've seen in place with states would suffice. You're seeing the country changing, reiterating his position on Roe. "I've never been more supportive of it's my body, I can do what I want with it. But I have been supportive of the notion that this is probably the most rational allocation of my responsibility that all the major religions have signed on and debated over the last 1,000 years." So very convoluted quote, frankly, there from Biden, almost abandoning the libertarian framing and kind of putting in his own, putting in his own like religious interests, I guess, within that. But I mean, at a baseline level, Krystal, you can't say that you're going to pass Roe versus Wade when the last time that Democrats had a filibuster-proof majority and control of the House of Representatives under Barack Obama, who also said that he would do it, they didn't do it. So why would they believe you? Also, as I understand it, maybe I'm wrong, mathematically, in the terms of the Senate math, it's actually impossible for them to get a filibuster-proof majority. He supports the filibuster. Thus, how can you claim that with a straight face? There's not a single Republican in the United States Senate that would sign on to specifically Roe. Now, maybe a 14-week or whatever. Maybe. I still doubt it. But my point is like, this is and that's the only promise he's got, and it's a fake one if you know anything about how the political system is structured.
I am just really struck by, I mean, listen, presidents put out all kinds of delusional promises. That's par for the course. I mean, I'm actually surprised they don't talk about that more. This is honestly the first time I've even really heard him mention that he hasn't even an intention of codifying Roe as the law of the land. So your point is apt that he has no actual strategy for getting that done. And part of the reason he has no strategy for getting that done is evidenced in the other part of the quote where he's like, yeah, this whole pro-choice thing is not really my bag.
Yeah,
it's my body, my choice. That's not really ever been my thing. It's like, do you understand how this issue has saved your party's ass now in multiple elections? That this is like the only reason why you all did okay in the midterms and did all right in these special elections, et cetera? And you're gonna like pour cold water on it and make it very clear to everyone involved that, you don't really care, you're not gonna fight for it, and you'll throw out some empty words and empty promises, but it doesn't go any beyond that. Yeah. Now, I think most people who are voting on this issue are not actually voting on like, oh, I think the Democrats are really gonna like restore my rights. They're voting on the Republicans are gonna make things even worse. And the Republicans have demonstrated that they wanna make things even worse. In states across the country, you know, the IVF situation in Alabama, there was a bill that would have codified access and protect IVF at the federal level that Republicans blocked. So I think that's where probably more of the energy is, because people just have so little hope that any of the parties really going to deliver for them, let alone a man who just comes out and is basically like, yeah, pro-choice, that's not really my thing. So I think that's where the energy is, but this certainly doesn't help his prospects and is part of why they don't let him do interviews very often because he says stuff like this.
It's like, what are you talking about? It's also interesting because that type of messaging might, see, even then, I think about it. Something I go back and watch all the time, just to remind myself of a different world, is Bill Clinton's acceptance speech of the 1992 Democratic Convention. It's on YouTube if anybody wants to go and watch it. And he's adamant. He says safe, legal, and rare over and over again. It's kind of like a perfect secular messaging, in my opinion. And what came across to me with Biden is I still think in his mind he's living in the 1980s, where he's living in like a very Christian country where the moral majority and all that still exists. It's like, bro, you know, half this country is, you know, Christian to the point where like they don't go to church and it's mostly entirely cultural. If you were to question and like really dig down into their real beliefs, they're agnostic at best and mostly just secular and or non-believers, deeply more socially libertarian than at any time in modern history. I've never believed that safe, legal, and rare is like the most popular messaging today than it was in 1992 when Bill Clinton won that election. So it's interesting to me to see him kind of torture himself through this. And then the final part that we had to pull here, let's please put this up there because it's just, you can't even make it up. Now, in terms of proving his prowess about saying that the White House, by allaying criticism that the White House is, quote, insular or dismissive of reality, Jeff Zients, who is the chief of staff, has pointed to Biden's reputation of, quote, soliciting opinions from critics. As he says, just the other day, he picked up the phone and he called Larry Summers.
What a bold move. No president's ever done that before.
Yeah, he would be, I believe he would be, so Trump definitely never called Larry Summers. Oh, he probably met with him. So Obama employed Larry Summers. Bill Clinton employed Larry Summers. George W. Bush, I wouldn't put it past him to talk to Larry Summers. So how many presidents in a row then does that make? That doesn't make you unconventional. That's like, you know, going to a Georgetown cocktail party, soliciting foreign policy advice and saying that you're going outside of the normal thing.
It's like dissenting voices.
I don't think that's how it works. Maybe want to update the boomer or silent generation president. I apologize. He said Biden's other occasional calls range from columnist Thomas Friedman to Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell. He says that's how you pressure test decisions. What world is this gentleman living in?
Oh, you know? My God.
Seriously, when I connect the abortion thing, this man is in the 1980s. That's what he is.
You can't, you couldn't possibly name 3 more staid architects of the status quo than those 3 men. I mean, it really, like, that's the list of people that comes out of your mouth is actually quite extraordinary. And, you know, Zients has come in, he replaced Ron Klain. Klain had some better ties with the progressive world. He was pushing, you know, the big stimulus at the beginning of the administration. There was a lot more sort of connectivity with a more aggressive, like FDR style. Not that he ever came anywhere close to living up to that, but that was more of the vision. Zients is this corporate establishment sold out tool.
Pharma, it's worth like $200 million.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, you know, there has been, basically since he's come in, Biden hasn't really done anything that has been good. So that's effectively the tenure of Jeff Zients, and, you know, that he's the one saying, oh, well, Biden's doing great. He's seeking out all these dissenting voices and pressure testing his decisions with Larry Summers, Mitch McConnell, and Thomas Friedman.
It's nuts.
It is so revealing, and also incredibly hilarious.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.